I'm Jenna, 34 years old. I thought I had a perfect marriage until the day my husband told me he was leaving for another woman. She was pregnant with his child, or so he claimed. I was devastated when he packed his bags and walked out. But something didn't feel right about the whole situation. Little did he know I was about to uncover the truth that would change everything. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my cheating husband, drop a comment if you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right in your relationship. Trust me, this story will remind you why intuition matters. Growing up in Portland, I was always the ambitious one. My parents weren't wealthy, so I worked multiple jobs to put myself through college. By the time I graduated, I had landed a position at a pharmaceutical company and quickly worked my way up to becoming one of their top sales representatives. My career was thriving, but my love life had been a series of disappointments. That all changed 6 years ago when I attended a charity gala for children's cancer research. I was there representing my company, which had donated a significant amount to the cause. That's where I met Ryan. He was standing near the bar, tall and confident in his perfectly tailored suit. When our eyes met across the room, I felt that movie moment connection people talk about, but I never believed existed. He approached me with a charming smile and said, "I've been working up the courage to talk to you all evening." Ryan was 36, a successful attorney specializing in corporate law. He was intelligent, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. We talked for hours that night, exchanging stories about our childhoods, our ambitions, and our values. By the end of the evening, I knew there was something special between us. Our romance moved quickly. Within 3 months, we were practically inseparable. Ryan was everything I had been looking for in a partner. He was attentive, thoughtful, and made me laugh like no one else could. He surprised me with weekend getaways and remembered the smallest details about things I liked. For my birthday, he got me a first edition of my favorite childhood book. I felt seen in a way I never had before. 6 months into our relationship, Ryan proposed during a sunset hike on Mount Hood. He had packed a picnic dinner with all my favourites, and as the sky turned pink and orange, he got down on one knee and asked me to spend my life with him. I said yes without hesitation. We were married the following spring in a beautiful ceremony on the Oregon coast. I can still remember the sound of the waves crashing as we exchanged our vows. My father, who was usually stoic, cried as he walked me down the aisle. Ryan's vows promised to love, cherish, and respect me for all our days. I believed every word. The first years of our marriage were everything I had dreamed of. We travelled extensively, visiting Paris, Tokyo, and the Amalfi Coast. Ryan's law practice was growing, and I continued to excel in my pharmaceutical sales position. We bought a beautiful craftsman-style home in a trendy Portland neighbourhood and spent weekends fixing it up together, transforming it into our dream home. We had discussed having children early in our relationship and agreed that we wanted to wait a few years to focus on our careers and enjoy our time together before starting a family. It seemed like a responsible, mature decision at the time. We were in our early 30s and believed we had plenty of time. Our social life revolved around a close-knit group of friends, mostly other professional couples we'd met through work or mutual connections. We hosted dinner parties regularly where Ryan would show off his culinary skills while I made sure everyone's wine glasses stayed full. Our friends often commented on how perfect we seemed together, how in sync we were. I also developed a close relationship with Ryan's family, especially his mother, Sandra. She was a warm, caring woman who treated me like the daughter she never had. We would go shopping together or meet for lunch when Ryan was busy with work. She often told me how happy she was that her son had found me. As our 5th anniversary approached, Ryan surprised me with a trip to Hawaii. We stayed at a luxurious resort on Maui, spent our days lounging on the beach, and our nights enjoying romantic dinners under the stars. It was during this trip that we finally decided it was time to start trying for a baby. I remember the conversation so clearly. We were sitting on our private balcony watching the sunset when Ryan turned to me and said, "I think I'm ready to be a dad." if you're ready to be a mum." I was ecstatic. I had always wanted children, and the idea of creating a family with Ryan filled me with joy. As we raised our glasses to toast our decision, I had no idea that this moment of happiness would lead to the unravelling of everything I thought I knew about my marriage and the man I had chosen to share my life with. The months that followed our Hawaii trip were filled with excited anticipation. I downloaded fertility tracking apps, started taking prenatal vitamins, and read every book I could find about conception and pregnancy. Ryan and I approached baby making with the same enthusiasm we did everything else in our lives. We even created a schedule based on my ovulation cycle to maximize our chances. But as the months passed with no positive pregnancy test, our initial excitement began to fade. I started to worry after 6 months of trying without success. Ryan assured me that these things take time, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes each time I told him my period had arrived. After a year of trying, I suggested we both get checked out to make sure everything was functioning properly. Ryan was hesitant at first, saying it hadn't been that long, but eventually agreed. We underwent a battery of tests over the next few weeks. The results were inconclusive. I had a slightly irregular menstrual cycle, but nothing that should prevent conception. Ryan's tests showed slightly lower than average sperm motility, but the doctor assured us it was nothing serious enough to prevent pregnancy altogether. "These things sometimes just take time," our doctor said reassuringly. "Keep trying naturally for another 6 months, and if nothing happens, we can discuss other options." I threw myself into researching fertility food supplements and techniques. Our once spontaneous and passionate love life became mechanical and scheduled. Sex became a means to an end rather than an expression of love. I could feel something shifting between us, but I was so focused on getting pregnant that I pushed my concerns aside. Around this time, I noticed Ryan starting to work later hours. He had always been dedicated to his job, but suddenly he was missing dinner multiple times a week and sometimes came home after I was already asleep. When I asked about his increasing absence, he explained that he was working on a big case and needed to put in extra hours to impress the partners at his firm. "This could mean a promotion, Jenna," he said. "Think about what that would mean for our family, especially when we have a baby." I wanted to be supportive, so I didn't push the issue. Instead, I tried to find ways to reconnect despite his busy schedule. I planned surprise date nights and weekend getaways, but Ryan often seemed distracted and distant. He would check his phone constantly, and conversations that once flowed effortlessly between us became stilted and superficial. I first noticed the change in how he guarded his phone about 8 months after we started trying for a baby. Previously, Ryan had been casual about his phone, often leaving it on the counter or asking me to check a text if he was driving. Now he kept it with him constantly, and I noticed he had added a new passcode. When I mentioned it casually, he became defensive. "I have confidential client information, Jenna. The firm has new security protocols." It made sense logically, but something about his tone felt off. Our physical intimacy also changed dramatically. We went from trying to conceive almost daily to maybe once a week, and even then, it felt like Ryan was just going through the motions. He rarely initiated anymore, and when I did, he often claimed he was too tired or stressed from work. I first heard the name Amber about 10 months into our fertility struggles. Ryan mentioned her casually over dinner one night. "The firm hired a new associate today, Amber Collins. She seems sharp, graduated, top of her class from Stanford Law." I didn't think much of it at the time. Law firms hired new associates regularly, and Ryan had mentioned plenty of colleagues over the years. But in the weeks that followed, Amber's name kept coming up in conversation. They were staffed on the same cases. They had similar approaches to legal strategy. They both enjoyed obscure indie bands. It was all innocent enough on the surface, but the frequency with which he mentioned her name started to create a knot of unease in my stomach. The annual holiday party for Ryan's firm was always a lavish affair held at one of Portland's finest hotels. I had been looking forward to it as a chance to reconnect with Ryan in a festive setting. I spent hours getting ready, wearing a new red dress I had purchased specifically for the occasion. When we arrived, Ryan immediately got pulled into a conversation with some of the partners, leaving me to fend for myself at the bar. That's when I first saw her. Amber was stunning with long blonde hair and legs that seemed to go on forever. She was surrounded by a group of associates, all clearly captivated by whatever story she was telling. Later in the evening, I watched as she and Ryan spoke in a corner of the room. There was something in the way they leaned toward each other, the way she touched his arm when she laughed, that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. When Ryan noticed me watching, he quickly excused himself and returned to my side a little too jovially, introducing me to various colleagues. On the ride home, my best friend Taylor, who had attended as my +1 since Ryan was busy networking, voiced what I had been afraid to acknowledge. "Did you notice how Ryan was with that blonde woman?" she asked carefully. "Amber." I said the name, feeling bitter on my tongue. "She's a new associate." "Well, new associate or not, they seemed pretty friendly, and he barely spent any time with you all evening." I defended Ryan, telling Taylor she was overreacting, but her observation planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing more red flags. There were receipts for dinners at expensive restaurants on nights he claimed to be working late at the office. A hotel charge appeared on our credit card statement during a week he was supposedly at a legal conference in Seattle. When I confronted him about these discrepancies, Ryan always had a plausible explanation. The dinner receipts were for client meetings. The hotel charge was from when he had to stay overnight near the office during a case crunch. One night, while Ryan was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do. I checked his email. I felt ashamed of my lack of trust, but the gnawing suspicion had become unbearable. To my surprise and temporary relief, I found nothing suspicious. No intimate exchanges, no evidence of an affair. It made me question whether I was becoming paranoid, letting the stress of our fertility issues affect my judgment. I tried to push my suspicions aside and focus on saving our marriage, but the distance between us continued to grow, and with each passing day, I felt more like a stranger in my own home, watching my once perfect marriage slowly disintegrate before my eyes. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when my life fell apart. I remember every detail with painful clarity. I had come home early from work because of a migraine. The house was quiet as I took my medication and lay down in our darkened bedroom, hoping to sleep off the pain. I must have dozed off because the sound of the front door opening startled me awake. Footsteps moved through the house with purpose, not the usual careful tread of someone trying not to wake a sleeping person. I heard Ryan moving around downstairs, opening and closing drawers. Curious and a bit concerned, I made my way downstairs, despite the pounding in my head. Ryan was in his home office pulling files from his cabinet and placing them in his briefcase. He looked up with surprise when I appeared in the doorway. "You're home early," he said, his voice strangely flat. "Migraine," I explained, gesturing to my head. "What are you doing home in the middle of the day?" He closed his briefcase with a decisive click that seemed to echo through the room. "We need to talk, Jenna." Those 4 words sent a chill down my spine. Ryan moved past me to the living room and sat down on the couch. I followed my legs, feeling wooden beneath me. He didn't look at me as I sat beside him, instead focusing on some invisible point on the wall ahead. "I've been unhappy for a while," he began, his voice controlled and rehearsed. "I think we both know things haven't been working between us." The words hit me like physical blows. Yes, we'd had our struggles, especially with trying to conceive, but I thought we were working through them. I thought we were solid underneath it all. "If this is about the baby thing, we can stop trying for a while," I said desperately. "We can focus on us." Ryan shook his head, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were cold in a way I'd never seen before. "It's not just that, Jenna. I've met someone else. I'm leaving you." The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the couch to steady myself. "What? Who? How long?" "It's Amber," he said, and the name no longer felt like just a threat, but like a bullet that had found its target. "We've been seeing each other for a few months. And she's pregnant with my baby." Those last words echoed in my head like a cruel taunt. After all our trying, all our disappointment, he had gotten someone else pregnant. The injustice of it was staggering. "She could give me what you couldn't," he added, twisting the knife deeper. I don't remember exactly what I said next. I know I pleaded, cried, raged. I demanded to know how this had happened when he had decided our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. But Ryan had clearly made up his mind. He moved with detached efficiency, going upstairs to pack a suitcase with enough clothes and necessities to tide him over. "I'll arrange to get the rest of my things later," he said as he headed for the door, suitcase in hand. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me collapsed on the floor of our home, surrounded by the shattered pieces of what I thought was my perfect life. The next few days passed in a blur of grief and shock. I barely ate or slept. Friends called, but I let their messages go to voicemail, unable to face telling anyone what had happened. It was Taylor who finally let herself in with the spare key after I hadn't responded to her texts for 2 days. She found me in bed, still wearing the same clothes I had on when Ryan left. Without judgment, she helped me shower, made me eat something, and stayed with me through the night as I cycled between sobbing and numb silence. The call from Sandra came on the 3rd day after Ryan left. Her voice was tight with emotion as she asked if she could come over. When she arrived, her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "He told us last night," she said, as we sat at my kitchen table, cups of untouched tea growing cold between us. "I don't understand what's happened to my son Jenna. The way he's behaving, the things he's saying about this woman and the baby. It's not the Ryan I raised." Her loyalty to me, despite her son's actions, was a small comfort in the storm of betrayal. Word spread quickly through our social circle. Some friends called to offer support. Others disappeared, uncomfortable with the messiness of our situation, or perhaps already choosing sides. The humiliation of having everyone know that Ryan had left me for a pregnant colleague was almost as painful as the loss itself. A week after Ryan left, a courier delivered divorce papers to the house. Ryan was offering a generous financial settlement in exchange for an uncontested divorce. A clean break, his lawyer called it, as if severing a 6-year marriage could ever be clean. I could barely function, let alone make decisions about the rest of my life. My parents flew in from Arizona to stay with me, my mother cooking meals I couldn't eat. My father awkwardly patting my shoulder as I cried. They had loved Ryan like a son, and their confusion and anger on my behalf only added to the emotional chaos. In my darker moments, I questioned everything about myself. Was I not attractive enough? Not exciting enough? Was there something fundamentally wrong with me that I couldn't give him a child? The weight of these questions kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom we had shared, wondering how I could have been so blind to what was happening in my own marriage. For 2 weeks, I existed in a fog of grief and disbelief. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on sales pitches and client meetings, while my personal life was in shambles. Eventually, though, the practical realities of life forced me to emerge from my cocoon of misery. Bills needed to be paid, decisions needed to be made about the house, and I couldn't hide from the world forever. My first day back at work was harder than I expected. Colleagues offered sympathetic smiles and awkward condolences. I kept my head down, focusing on catching up on emails and reorganizing my territory. It felt surreal to be engaging in these mundane tasks when my life had been turned upside down. That evening, I stopped at the local grocery store on my way home, dreading the thought of another night alone in the house, but equally unenthusiastic about accepting one of the pity dinner invitations I'd received. I was in the produce section, mindlessly squeezing avocados when I heard someone call my name. Diane Ryan's longtime legal assistant stood a few feet away, a basket of groceries on her arm. She had always been kind to me, sending thoughtful Christmas cards and remembering my birthday each year. The look on her face now was one of profound discomfort. "Jenna, I've been thinking about you," she said, her voice low. "How are you holding up?" "I'm surviving," I answered honestly, "one day at a time." Diane glanced around as if checking whether anyone could overhear us. "Listen, I probably shouldn't say anything, but the timing of all this, it doesn't make sense." Her words caught my full attention. "What do you mean?" "Amber is supposedly 4 months pregnant," she said. "But Ryan was in Boston 4 months ago for that conference, remember? The one where he called you every night." I remembered. It had been a week-long conference on corporate tax law. Ryan had indeed called me each evening, sometimes sounding tired but always checking in. It had never occurred to me to question his whereabouts during that trip. "Maybe I'm wrong," Diane backpedaled, seeing my expression. "It's just office gossip, and I shouldn't have said anything. Please forget I mentioned it." But I couldn't forget. Her words had awakened something in me, a curiosity that cut through the fog of grief. That night at home, I pulled out my planner and began calculating dates. If Amber was 4 months pregnant now, in early April, that meant conception would have occurred in early December. Ryan had indeed been in Boston the first week of December for the conference. I remembered more details now. He had given a presentation on the second day. He had brought me back a snow globe from a gift shop near the hotel. These weren't the actions of someone secretly starting an affair, were they? The next morning, I called Taylor, who worked in human resources and had connections throughout the city. "I need a good private investigator," I told her. "Someone discreet." "Jenna," she said cautiously, "are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better not to know all the details." "I need to know the truth," I insisted. "Something isn't adding up." Taylor reluctantly gave me the name of an investigator her company had used for corporate background checks. Michael Drake was a former police detective who now ran his own private investigation firm. I called and scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Drake's office was in a nondescript building downtown. He was a middle-aged man with keen eyes and a matter-of-fact demeanor that I found reassuring. I explained my situation and my specific concerns about the timeline of Amber's pregnancy. "So, you want me to look into this woman's background and her relationship with your husband," he clarified. "Yes," I confirmed. "I need to know when their relationship really began, and if there's anything unusual about her pregnancy claim." Drake took detailed notes and asked for any information I had on Amber. It wasn't much, just her full name and workplace. He promised to begin investigating right away. While waiting for Drake's findings, I did some research of my own. I spent hours online learning about pregnancy, dating conception windows, and the accuracy of due dates. I learned that due dates were typically calculated based on the first day of a woman's last menstrual period, not the actual date of conception, which usually occurred about 2 weeks later. This new information made the timeline even more puzzling. If Amber was truly 4 months pregnant, conception would have occurred even earlier than I initially thought, at a time when Ryan was definitely in Portland, but showing no signs of an affair. A week after our initial meeting, Drake called with some preliminary findings. "I've got some interesting information on Ms. Collins," he said. "Before moving to Portland and joining your husband's firm, she was in a relationship with Dr. James Bennett, a fertility specialist in Seattle. They dated for nearly 2 years before breaking up last summer." "A fertility specialist," I repeated, my mind racing with possibilities. "Yes, and here's where it gets interesting. Dr. Bennett still practices at the Pacific Northwest Fertility Clinic. Guess who had an appointment there 3 months ago? Amber Collins." I felt a surge of adrenaline. "She was seeing a fertility doctor, are you sure?" "Positive. I have a source at the clinic who confirmed she was there for a procedure, though of course they couldn't share medical details." This revelation sent me down a new research path. I spent the next day learning everything I could about fertility treatments, IVF, and sperm donation. The more I read, the more a theory began to form in my mind. I scheduled a meeting with my gynecologist, Dr. Patil, under the guise of discussing my own fertility options post-divorce. After covering the basics of freezing eggs and future treatment options, I carefully steered the conversation. "I've been reading about IVF," I said casually. "It's amazing what's possible now." "Yes, reproductive technology has advanced tremendously," Dr. Patil agreed. "Is that something you're considering?" "Maybe in the future," I said. "I'm just trying to understand everything better. For instance, if someone used a sperm donor for IVF, would the pregnancy progress any differently?" Dr. Patil explained that the pregnancy itself would be no different than one conceived naturally. She also mentioned that many women underwent IVF using partners' sperm due to various fertility issues. As our conversation ended, I had a better understanding of how someone might become pregnant through means other than natural conception, but I still needed more concrete evidence before I could draw any conclusions about Amber's pregnancy. That evening, I went through the filing cabinet in our home office, where we kept important documents. In the medical folder, I found copies of the fertility tests Ryan and I had done. I reread his semen analysis, which I had only skimmed when we first received it. The report indicated that while Ryan's sperm count was within normal range, his motility was significantly below average. The doctor had downplayed this at the time, but reading it now, I saw that the report concluded that natural conception might be challenging, but not impossible. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I needed more. Drake called the next day with another update. "I tracked Dr. Bennett's movements," he said. "He was in Portland for a medical conference in January, the same weekend that your husband was supposedly working on a big case, and Amber took 2 days off work that same week. This was the confirmation I needed to pursue my theory further. If Amber had undergone IVF with donor sperm, presenting the pregnancy as Ryan's natural child would be a calculated deception. But why? What did she gain by trapping Ryan with a pregnancy that wasn't biologically his?" Drake's next discovery provided a possible motive. "I did some digging into Ms. Collins's financial situation," he said. "She's carrying substantial student loan debt from Stanford, over $200,000, and she was passed over for partnership at her previous firm in Seattle, which is likely why she moved to Portland last year." A picture was emerging of a woman with financial pressures and career setbacks, who might see Ryan with his successful practice and family connections in the legal community as a solution to her problems. But I still needed proof that the baby wasn't Ryan's before I could take any action. My attorney advised caution. "These are serious allegations, Jenna," she warned. "Without definitive proof of paternity fraud, making accusations could backfire badly in your divorce proceedings." I understood the risks, but couldn't let go of my suspicion that Ryan was being manipulated as much as I was being discarded. My next step would require careful planning and a bit of luck. The key to confirming my suspicions about the baby's paternity lay in obtaining DNA samples from both Ryan and Amber. Drake had explained that while a direct paternity test would be impossible without their cooperation, there were other options. Grandparental DNA testing can establish whether a child is biologically related to the grandparents, he explained. If we could get samples from Ryan's parents that could tell us whether the baby Amber is carrying could possibly be their biological grandchild. It was a long shot, but I still had a good relationship with Sandra. Despite Ryan's protests, she had maintained contact with me, checking in regularly, and even suggesting we meet for dinner occasionally. I hated the idea of using her kindness for my investigation, but I needed answers. When Sandra called to invite me to dinner the following week, I accepted immediately. "I've missed our talks," she said warmly. "Ryan doesn't understand that just because you two are separating doesn't mean you stop being family to me." I spent the days leading up to our dinner wrestling with my conscience. Was it ethical to collect Sandra's DNA without her knowledge? Would finding the truth justify the means? I consoled myself with the fact that if the baby truly was Ryan's, the test would confirm it, and no harm would be done. But if my suspicions were correct, Sandra deserved to know she was being deceived about her supposed grandchild. We met at a quiet restaurant near Sandra's home. She looked tired the past few weeks, clearly taking a toll on her as well. After we ordered, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "How are you really doing, Jenna?" she asked, genuine concern in her eyes. "Some days are better than others," I answered truthfully. "The shock is wearing off, but the questions remain," Sandra nodded. "I have questions too. This isn't the son I know. The Ryan I raised would never treat anyone the way he's treated you." The conversation flowed easily between us, covering neutral topics like her garden club and my work. As we neared the end of the meal, Sandra mentioned something that made my heart race. "Ryan and Amber are having a gender reveal party this weekend," she said, disapproval evident in her tone. "Gordon and I are expected to attend, of course. Apparently, it's a boy." A gender reveal meant the pregnancy was progressing, making time of the essence if I wanted to uncover the truth before Ryan committed himself further to what might be a lie. As we finished our dessert, I watched carefully as Sandra used her water glass and utensils. When she excused herself to use the restroom before we left, I quickly placed her used fork and napkin in a plastic bag I had brought in my purse. The following day, I delivered the items to a forensic DNA lab Drake had recommended. They specialized in legal cases and promised strict confidentiality. The testing would take about a week, during which time I tried to focus on work and not obsess over what the results might show. 7 days later, I received a call from the lab. "Ms. Matthews, we have the results of the grandparental DNA test you requested," the technician said. "Based on the samples provided, we can state with 99.9% certainty that the individual who used these utensils cannot be biologically related to the child in question." My hand shook as I processed what she was saying. "To be clear, you're saying that Sandra Matthews cannot possibly be the grandmother of Amber Collins's baby." "That is correct," the technician confirmed. "The genetic markers are incompatible. It would be biologically impossible for her son to be the father of this child." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. I had been right. The baby Amber was carrying could not be Ryan's. But I knew that this preliminary evidence obtained without consent wouldn't be enough. I needed something more definitive, and I needed to be strategic about how and when to reveal what I knew. My attorney advised caution when I shared my findings with her. "This is compelling, Jenna, but legally problematic since you obtained the sample without consent. I recommend getting more direct evidence before confronting Ryan or making any claims in the divorce proceedings." I agreed, but felt a growing sense of urgency. What if Ryan married Amber before the truth came out? What if he committed to raising a child that wasn't his, based on a lie? My opportunity came unexpectedly when I saw a social media post about a restaurant opening the following weekend. The post tagged several people who would be attending, including Ryan and Amber. It was a high-profile event for a celebrity chef's new restaurant in downtown Portland, and many of the city's prominent professionals would be there. I wasn't on the guest list, but I knew the PR coordinator for the restaurant through my pharmaceutical work. A quick call secured me an invitation as a last-minute addition. "The more influential people, the better," she had said, unaware of the drama she was enabling. I spent the week preparing for this confrontation. I bought a new dress, had my hair and makeup done professionally, and rehearsed maintaining my composure no matter what happened. The goal was to appear confident and unbothered while obtaining the DNA samples I needed. The night of the opening arrived, and I entered the crowded restaurant with my head held high. The reaction was immediate. Conversations paused as people recognized me, wondering why Ryan Matthews' soon-to-be ex-wife was at an event he was attending with his pregnant girlfriend. I spotted them across the room. Ryan looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around nervously. Amber, visibly pregnant in a tight blue dress, had her arm looped possessively through his. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed and she whispered something to Ryan. I moved through the room, greeting acquaintances and business contacts, as if this were any other networking event. I stayed on the opposite side of the restaurant from Ryan and Amber, watching from a distance as they interacted with other guests. Ryan kept looking in my direction, clearly unsettled by my presence. My chance came during the chef's welcome speech. Everyone's attention was directed toward the small stage set up near the kitchen. I noticed Ryan and Amber had left their drinks and appetizer plates at their table while they moved closer to hear the speech. Moving casually, I approached their table as if I were looking for a place to set down my own glass. With a practiced motion, I collected Amber's napkin and Ryan's discarded cocktail napkin, sliding them into my clutch. I left the event shortly after rushing the samples to the 24-hour DNA testing lab Drake had arranged. The technician assured me they would process the samples immediately, with results available the following day. I barely slept that night, alternating between anxiety about what I had done and anticipation of finally having definitive proof. The call came at 11 a.m. the next morning. "Ms. Matthews, we have completed the requested DNA comparison," the lab technician said. "The male and female samples you provided show no compatible genetic markers that would indicate a parental relationship to the same fetus. In layman's terms, it would be biologically impossible for these two individuals to be the parents of the same child." Despite having suspected this all along, hearing the scientific confirmation was still shocking. Ryan was not the father of Amber's baby. She had deliberately deceived him and, by extension, destroyed our marriage based on a lie. The question now was what to do with this information. My attorney helped me develop a strategy. "Ryan's birthday is coming up," I said during our meeting. "Sandra mentioned they're having a family dinner at their house. She invited me, saying it might be the last one I attend as part of the family." "That would be the perfect opportunity," my attorney agreed. "Present the evidence in a controlled environment with his family present. It might mitigate his reaction and provide witnesses to what transpires." With my evidence compiled and plan in place, I purchased a small gift box and placed the DNA test results inside, along with a letter explaining how I had obtained them and what they meant. It was a risky move, but I was tired of being the victim in a story I hadn't written. Ryan's birthday dinner was set for the following Friday. Sandra had texted me the details, adding that she knew it would be awkward, but that she wanted me there. I replied that I wouldn't miss it, and that I had a special gift for Ryan. As the day approached, I rehearsed what I would say and how I would handle various reactions. I knew this confrontation would be dramatic, but I was no longer the broken woman Ryan had left behind. I was reclaiming my narrative, one uncomfortable truth at a time. The evening of Ryan's birthday arrived cool and clear for April in Portland. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress that I knew was flattering but not provocative. I wanted to appear composed and dignified, not as if I were trying too hard or seeking attention. The gift box sat on the passenger seat of my car as I drove to Sandra and Gordon's house in the West Hills. Inside was the documentation of the DNA tests printed on the lab's official letterhead, along with a brief explanation of what the results meant. The package was tied with a simple blue ribbon, innocuous looking despite its explosive contents. As I pulled into the familiar driveway, I could see several cars already parked, including Ryan's Audi and a red Mini Cooper. I assumed belonged to Amber. My heart pounded as I gathered my purse and the gift box. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the culmination of weeks of investigation and planning. Sandra opened the door before I could ring the bell, enveloping me in a warm hug. "I'm so glad you came," she whispered. "No matter what's happened, you'll always be family to me." Her words strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about exposing a lie, it was about protecting people I cared about from further deception. The living room fell silent as I entered. Ryan stood near the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, his expression darkening when he saw me. Amber sat on the couch, her baby bump prominent under a floral maternity dress. Gordon, Ryan's father, gave me an awkward nod, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but too polite to show it. Ryan's younger brother Matt and his wife Julie were there too, along with a couple I recognised as family friends. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see how this potentially volatile reunion would unfold. "Jenna," Ryan said stiffly, breaking the silence, "I didn't expect you to come." "Your mother invited me," I replied calmly. "I wouldn't miss your birthday, Ryan. We were married for 6 years after all." Sandra quickly intervened, ushering everyone to the dining room where the table was set for dinner. I was placed opposite Amber with Ryan at the head of the table between us. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Throughout the appetizer course, conversation was stilted and awkward. Gordon asked about my work. Matt talked about his recent promotion. Julie mentioned their plans to renovate their kitchen. Everyone carefully avoided mentioning the divorce or the pregnancy until Amber decided to take center stage. "We've been making progress on the nursery," she announced, placing her hand possessively on her stomach. Ryan picked out the most adorable sports-themed wallpaper for our little boy. Ryan smiled at her, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Amber has been amazing with all the preparations," he added. "She's read every baby book available." I noticed Sandra's eyes flicker between Ryan and me, a look of discomfort crossing her face. She had never been good at hiding her feelings. Amber continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "We have the ultrasound next week to check on development. Ryan is so excited to be a father." That was my cue. I reached into my purse and pulled out the gift box, setting it on the table. "Speaking of fatherhood, I have a special gift for the father-to-be," I said, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. Ryan looked at the small box suspiciously. "You didn't have to get me anything, Jenna." "Oh, but I did," I insisted, pushing the box toward him. "Go ahead, open it. I think you'll find it illuminating." The table fell silent as Ryan reluctantly took the box and untied the ribbon. He lifted the lid and stared at the papers inside his brow, furrowing as he began to read. I watched as confusion gave way to shock, then anger, his face draining of colour until it was ashen. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice barely controlled. "It's a DNA test," I said, clearly making sure everyone at the table could hear. "Actually, it's several DNA tests. They all show the same result. You cannot possibly be the biological father of Amber's baby." The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Amber's face contorted with panic, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. Sandra reached for the papers, which Ryan surrendered without resistance, his eyes locked on Amber. "This has to be a mistake," Amber stuttered, her hand protectively covering her stomach. "Those tests aren't accurate. Jenna's just trying to cause problems because she's jealous." The tests were conducted by a forensic lab that specializes in legal cases, I countered calmly. The same kind used in court for paternity disputes. They're 99.9% accurate, and I had them done 3 times with different samples to be absolutely certain. Ryan finally found his voice again. "How did you get my DNA?" he asked, his tone more bewildered than angry. "From your cocktail napkin at the restaurant opening last week," I explained. "And Amber's from her napkin at the same event. I also had an earlier test done using a sample from your mother to see if she could possibly be the grandmother of this child. She can't be." Sandra was reading through the reports, her hands shaking. "These look official," she said, looking up at Amber with hurt and confusion. "What is going on here?" Amber's composed facade began to crumble. "It's not what it looks like," she insisted, tears forming in her eyes. "Ryan, don't listen to her. She's trying to ruin what we have." "What exactly do we have, Amber?" Ryan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Because it seems like what we have is a lie, a pretty elaborate one. I did it for us, Amber blurted out, then immediately covered her mouth, as if trying to take back the inadvertent confession. The room went completely silent. Even the clinking of silverware ceased as everyone froze, processing what Amber had just admitted. For us, Ryan repeated incredulously. How exactly is getting pregnant with someone else's child and passing it off as mine doing something for us? Amber's tears were flowing freely now, her carefully constructed story unraveling before everyone's eyes. You wanted a baby so badly, she sobbed. I saw how much it hurt you that Jenna couldn't give you one. I knew about your low motility from the medical records you shared with me. I just wanted to make you happy. By lying to me, by destroying my marriage based on a fraud. Ryan's voice rose with each question. I stood up, gathering my purse. My presence was no longer necessary now that the truth was out. I think my part in this evening is done, I said quietly. I'm sorry to have ruined your birthday dinner, Ryan, but I thought you deserved to know the truth before you committed yourself any further to a relationship built on lies. As I walked toward the door, I heard Sandra call my name. She hurried after me, catching me in the foyer. Jenna, she said, tears in her eyes. I don't know what to say. How did you figure this out? Something didn't add up about the timeline, I explained. Once I started looking deeper, the evidence was there. I'm sorry to have brought this chaos into your home tonight. Sandra shook her head, taking my hands in hers. No, you did the right thing. Thank you for caring enough to uncover the truth, even after how badly Ryan treated you. I hugged her goodbye, promising to call her soon. As I walked to my car, I could hear raised voices from inside the house, Ryan and Amber's arguments spilling out despite closed doors. I felt a curious sense of detachment, as if I were watching the final scene of a movie I had already emotionally checked out of. Driving away from the house that night, I realized I had finally closed a chapter of my life that had ended the moment Ryan told me he was leaving. But unlike that day when I had felt powerless and broken tonight, I was leaving on my own terms with my dignity intact and the truth finally exposed. Ryan's face white with shock as he realized the magnitude of the deception would stay with me for a long time. Not as an image of triumph, but as a reminder that sometimes the people we think we know the best are the ones capable of the greatest self-deception. And sometimes finding the truth, however painful, is the first step toward genuine healing. In the days following what I came to think of as the DNA dinner, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Ryan called repeatedly, his messages alternating between anger that I had publicly humiliated him and desperate apologies for how he had treated me. I let most go to voicemail, needing time to process everything myself before engaging with him. Amber disappeared from Portland almost immediately. I learned through Sandra that she had resigned from the law firm via email and returned to her hometown in Minnesota. The pregnancy was real enough, but the father remained a mystery, possibly a sperm donor she had accessed through her ex-boyfriend's fertility clinic. The divorce proceedings took an unexpected turn. Ryan's lawyer called mine, requesting a meeting to discuss new terms. Gone was the pressure for a quick settlement. Instead, Ryan offered a much more equitable division of assets and even suggested I keep the house if I wanted it. He's in damage control mode, my attorney explained. He knows how bad this would look if it became public knowledge in the legal community. A senior attorney duped by a junior colleague in such a personal way would be career poison. I didn't want to punish Ryan further. Despite everything, 6 years of marriage had left me with some residual care for his well-being. We eventually settled on terms that were fair to both of us. I kept the house, but gave him his family heirlooms and some of the artwork we had collected together. We divided our savings equally and each kept our respective retirement accounts. The emotional aftermath was more complicated than the legal one. For weeks after the confrontation, I oscillated between feeling vindicated and feeling empty. The truth had been revealed, but it didn't immediately heal the wound of betrayal or restore what I had lost. I decided to take a 6-week sabbatical from work, using some of the vacation time I had accumulated over the years. My boss was understanding, having witnessed my struggle to maintain professionalism throughout the divorce drama. "Take the time you need," he said. "Your clients will still be here when you get back, and frankly, Jenna, you've earned a break." I booked a flight to Europe, something I had always wanted to do, but had postponed for various reasons during my marriage. Starting in London, I made my way through Paris, Rome, and finally Barcelona, where I planned to spend 2 weeks in a small apartment near the beach. The trip was transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated, away from the familiar settings where every corner held memories of my life with Ryan. I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been submerged during my marriage. I visited museums at my own pace, ate whatever I wanted without considering someone else's preferences, and made spontaneous decisions about each day's activities. In Barcelona, I met Dr. Elena Vasquez, an American physician attending the same cooking class I had impulsively signed up for. We bonded over our shared inability to properly slice an onion, and soon we were meeting for coffee and beach walks. Elena was divorced as well, though her story was less dramatic than mine. Over sangria one evening, I found myself sharing the whole sordid tale. "That's worthy of a telenovela," she said, when I finished her expression a mix of shock and admiration. "But what amazes me most is your detective work. That took real courage and intelligence." Elena's perspective helped me see my actions in a new light. It wasn't just about exposing a lie or getting revenge. It was about standing up for the truth and refusing to be a victim of other people's deceptions. We became friends, and that friendship was the first real connection I had formed since my marriage ended that wasn't coloured by pity or awkwardness. Elena saw me as I was now, not as Ryan's ex-wife or the woman who had been left for a pregnant colleague. Returning to Portland after 6 weeks abroad, I felt ready to face my new reality. The house that had once felt too empty without Ryan now felt like a space full of possibilities. I decided to keep it redecorating some rooms to better reflect my own taste rather than our compromised aesthetic. My relationship with Sandra continued much to Ryan's initial displeasure. We met for lunch occasionally, carefully avoiding detailed discussions about Ryan or the divorce. She had been genuinely fond of me, and I of her, and neither of us saw reason to sever that connection. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my professional life and personal identity. I started my own pharmaceutical consulting business, using contacts I had developed over years in sales. The flexible schedule allowed me more time for self-care and new interests, like the photography class I had always wanted to take. I also joined a support group for women who had experienced betrayal in their relationships. The stories I heard there helped put my own experience in perspective and reminded me that healing wasn't linear. Some days were still hard, but they became fewer as time passed. Ryan reached out periodically, usually after he had been drinking. In one particularly vulnerable late-night call, he admitted that he had been unhappy in our marriage before Amber came along but hadn't had the courage to address it directly. "So you let her manipulate you with a fake pregnancy instead of having an honest conversation with your wife of 6 years?" I asked, not unkindly. "I was a coward," he admitted, "and I've lost everything that really mattered because of it." I didn't contradict him, but I didn't comfort him either. His recognition of his mistakes was necessary for his own growth, but it wasn't my responsibility to absolve him of guilt. A year after the DNA dinner, I decided to investigate my own fertility options. The desire to have children hadn't disappeared with my marriage, and at 35 I knew I needed to make decisions sooner rather than later. Dr. Patil ran a comprehensive fertility assessment and delivered surprisingly good news. "Your egg reserve is excellent for your age," she explained. "If you wanted to freeze eggs as an insurance policy while you decide about having children, Now would be a good time. I opted to freeze my eggs, a decision that felt empowering rather than desperate. It was a gift to my future self, whether I eventually had children with a new partner or decided to pursue single motherhood. When I heard through mutual friends that Amber had given birth to a healthy baby boy, I felt a strange lack of emotion. The child was innocent in all this, and I genuinely hoped he would have a good life. Amber had apparently told her family that the father was an ex-boyfriend who wanted no involvement, a partial truth at best. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Ryan at a charity event similar to the one where we had first met. He looked older, with new lines around his eyes and grey appearing at his temples. We spoke briefly, the conversation stilted but civil. "You look good, Jenna," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "Really good." "Thanks," I replied. "I am good. How about you?" He shrugged, a gesture so familiar it momentarily transported me back to our life together. "Getting there," he said. "Some lessons are harder to learn than others." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me until then. Ryan was no longer the man who had shattered my world, or the villain in my story. He was just a flawed person who had made terrible choices, as most of us do, at some point in our lives. Looking back now, I can see that the DNA test I dropped on that dinner table didn't just expose a lie about a pregnancy. It freed me from a marriage that had already failed in ways I hadn't been ready to acknowledge. It forced me to confront the painful truth that sometimes the people we love most are not who we believe them to be. And most importantly, it showed me my own strength and resilience in the face of betrayal. I don't know what the future holds for me romantically. I've dated casually, but haven't yet met someone who feels right for the long term. And that's okay. I'm no longer defining my worth by my relationship status or my ability to conceive a child. Instead, I'm building a life that feels authentic and fulfilling on my own terms. The DNA test didn't just expose his lie, it released me from a life built on falsehoods. Now, I'm building something real, with or without someone to share it with. And for the first time in years, I'm genuinely excited about what comes next. Has anyone else experienced that moment when your intuition proved right, despite everyone telling you that you were overreacting? Share your stories in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my story today, and may you always trust your inner voice when something doesn't feel right.